It's deeply embedded in the Australian psychology that we've got to go for a bigger and bigger population. But in this world, it's the smartness of the people and their economic competitiveness that determines living standards. The economic arguments beg to be looked at properly. You don't make Australia richer simply by giving it a bigger population. We can do more for the world with a smaller, highly educated population, managing competitive industries, and in an era of globalised trade, regarding the world, and not our domestic population, as our market. Isn't that the lesson of globalisation? The whole world is our market. We've given ourselves, as smart people, the last 30 years have given ourselves very competitive industries. And they are there to sustain us by exporting to the world. The idea that we had to replicate the American experience of the late 19th century in ramping up our population doesn't make economic sense. But when you deal with what our author once described in an earlier book as this tired brown land, it is an environmental impossibility. I won't attempt to summarise Marx's arguments, but you've only got to think about water. To the people who say we ought to have a population of 40 million, 50 million, 60 million, I say, where's the drinking water coming from? Look at the acute problems, and Sydney is the best accommodated of any of the capital cities in this respect. We've got the biggest, in proportion to our population, we've got the most generous storage capacity for water of any of the Australian cities. Go to Melbourne and there's a raging political argument about the state government deciding, as of necessity, it must suck in water from the country and build one of the world's biggest desal plants. Go to South Australia, where the Murray has ceased to flow, and where they've got to get through a baking dry summer before they look at any relief in their water position, and consider as a fallback proposition the delivery by truck, street by street, of the required potable water. And Perth, twice in the last 15 or so years, the rainfall in Perth has dropped, and it's dropped again. They're draining their aquifer for drinking water, and they've finished, or they're soon to finish, their second desal plant. There's a water crisis building up in southeast Queensland, where the population growth has been the highest of any part of Australia. And they got a break with the rain, but so serious was it that the community had to persist with this delusion there's some way of pumping water from the tropical north into the Brisbane catchment. Where is the water coming from? You see, every significant activity in Australia is subject to an environmental impact statement under state and federal law, except one, the most fundamental of all, a decision to ramp up immigration. There is no environmental assessment. None. Not required by law. And that determines the shape of our cities, the pressure on other species who like to think this continent is also their home. It affects our decisions about water. It affects soil. It affects everything. That is the fundamental. Again, we return to this point, the point Paul Ehrlich made in 1970 about the situation facing the world, the point Mark is making about Australia. It is the fundamental determinant. He challenges the environmental movement to give proper consideration to what's happening to the environment. And he introduces readers to the concept of Australia having, and we appropriate Tim Flannery's words, a carrying capacity. And he picks over fairly briskly the economic arguments such as those I've touched on. He concludes by saying, we must end the era when Australia had no population policy except more. That's where we've been. Our population policy has been more. Nothing more sophisticated than that. I speak to you tonight as someone who's an unabashed supporter of multiculturalism. I love the multicultural Australia we've got. I want to see Australia offer a generous haven to refugees. I'm opposed and repelled by how the Howard government manipulated the refugee issue to appeal to an Australian nativism. But I want to see population growth regarded as the most important of the determinants that shape our environment. And I want us to, above all, to recast old images of this wonderful continent we call our home. It's not Australia Unlimited. It's not a replica in the Southern Hemisphere of the riches and diversity and deep soils and fabulous river systems of North America. It's got its own beauty, but its beauty won't permit more of the despoilation that we seem embarked on. Mark is inviting us to debate these things, and I think that's a huge contribution. That's why I'm honoured to declare his book, Overloading Australia, launched in Glebe tonight. Thank you.